I can hardly read to begin with, so like this is okay. My name is Jason Brzali, and welcome to Ponder This. My job entails answering a lot of phone calls from end users, from distributors, from our territory managers, and helping them get what they need. I do have some experience volunteering with the Wisconsin DNR here, and one thing that Casco wants to be is a good neighbor and a good business that really follows the rules and regulations set forth by that governing body. Before working at Casco here, I was a high school biology teacher, so do your homework, kids. And I think that kind of leads into why I enjoy answering phone calls and emails, because I feel like I get to help out the customers that Casco has. One thing we do get a lot of is, will a de-icer work? And not only that, what a de-icer actually is. Some people call them bubblers, and I think even just the terminology is important to keep straight. So the de-icer works basically because there's an internal electric motor here that spins a prop, and we're basically just cycling that warmer bottom water up to the top. We're just using the principles of warmer water circulating to the top to keep your dock free of ice. Matt W. writes, how long have de-icers been around? Matt, great question. Casco has been moving water forward since 1968, and we actually started as a de-icer company, so we're creeping up towards 6 decades of helping people de-ice and move water forward. Justin K. writes, yeah, because chemicals in the water are always needed. Justin, that's a concern that I think everybody at Casco takes seriously, and that's why we're proud to say that none of our products are adding any sort of chemicals that are detrimental to the ecology and the ecosystem when operating our units. If I can geek out science-wise a little bit, water's densest at 39 degrees Fahrenheit, and so that warmest water of the winter is actually located at the bottom of a lake or water body. And so what our de-icers do is we just take that 39-degree water and cycle it up to the top so that it can't freeze. Rita N. asks, we had very similar pump for our cantilever pier. We were notified in writing by the town we had to have a special permit to be allowed to have it, with special reflectors in areas all around it, not worth the hassle here on Akachi Lake. That actually is a good question and a good statement, because we get this often, and Casco wants to make it very clear we're a Wisconsin-based company, so we know our Wisconsin DNR regulations, and so we base it off of that. We always lead with, please check with your local ordinances or regulations, because that varies state to state and even town to town. In Wisconsin, it's pretty clear on the DNR website, if de-icers are used, there needs to be one of two things that happen. Either there's a very clear and easy to read sign that says danger thin ice or open water, or there's some sort of snow fencing or some sort of rope that's roping off the area that is open. Obviously, we don't want anybody snowmobiling or falling into open water when it's 32 degrees outside. Dean F. writes, would like pricing. I know of 2 neighbors, as me, that would be interested. I think what Dean was getting at is he's got not only him, but 2 neighbors as well that are interested in de-icers. Casco makes this actually really easy. On our website, if you go to the de-icer tab underneath the products, you can download the current price sheet for all the individual models. And it also depends on if they want to add a controller like the C10 or some sort of dock mount system. That's an optional item. Tom F. Sr. writes, our neighbor used to use one. When the ice broke up in the spring, it took his whole dock out. Everybody else's dock was fine. Also brings up a really good point. We want to be very clear with our de-icers. This is meant to de-ice during the time when you would be walking or driving on the ice. There's not a product on the market, unfortunately, that's going to prevent any sort of ice shoves, any sort of large chunks of ice from moving where the wind or where the lake wants it to go. So that's out of our control, unfortunately. Graham W. writes, anybody figured out how to use the de-icer on a floating dock in a quiet bay, but with increasing water levels in the spring? This brings up another really good point. Whenever we get a call internally that I can't answer because it's a really specific sort of install, Casco is really fortunate that we have a de-icing expert on hand that is more than willing to give it the really specific touches on certain installs. Rising water levels, those sorts of things, floating docks on piers, those sorts of things where it's not just a pole-mounted docking system can be a challenge. And as long as we have good water depth, Casco normally has an install that'll work for most conditions. Pam S. writes, DNR does not allow those everywhere. These are the rules. Pam, that's a really good point. Absolutely. Each state, each municipality, each town might have different ordinances or rules or regulations. And we always recommend that you check with those local regulations and rules or statewide rules if that supersedes those townships to figure out if it's legal or not to put a de-icer in place. Andre D. writes, what about fish or confused ducks? I noticed our ducks fly south for the winter when the lake is all iced up. Any comments? Andre, on the topic of the fish, there's really no negative side effects of running a de-icer. There's a cage, metal cage around it. Most fish that are more than fingerling size aren't affected by the current produced by it, so we don't really have to worry too much about fish being negatively affected by it. And again, it goes back to the whole idea, if there's a little bit of open water there versus a sheet of ice, we can get some oxygen into the water where it might be low oxygen levels for the cold weather season. On the topic of migrating ducks, migration routes change, and some waterfowl may be flying south from Canada, but they overwinter in Wisconsin, so open water is also a benefit for those species. Lynn A.K. writes, I worry about the damage to the lake. Does something like this need to pass environmental regulations? Environmental regulations brings up another good point. Federal regulations doesn't always translate into state and local control, and those regulations can be vastly different. So Casco always recommends finding out what your state or local regulations are pertaining to de-icer installs for your particular lake. These de-icers aren't adding any sort of chemical into the water. It's an electric motor that's basically cycling the warm water from the bottom up to the top to keep that ice from freezing. So there's no chemicals being added in, and the environmental regulations are minimal in terms of adding some sort of algicide or herbicide that might need a permit. Kimberly E. writes, I think they are a great product, but they are very expensive. Casco is proud that all of our motors here are assembled in Prescott, Wisconsin, and there's a wide variety of prices based on horsepower, power cable length, and any sort of add-ons that you want. I think a lot of people are impressed with the clearing area of our half horsepower de-icer or 3/4 horsepower de-icer. And again, if you're worried about the cost of operation because of the electrical costs, a lot of times you don't need to run these things 24/7 to get sufficient de-icing results. Dawn S. writes, with this, can fish off dock all winter? I agree, that's exciting. If you want to do that, you could, but again, please be careful when you got open water and frigid temperatures and water that's just barely above freezing. Please be careful you don't fall in. Van Isle Salt writes, any saltwater versions? Van Isle Salt, great question. We've got a lot of these units in brackish and saltwater on each coastline. We've got a lot of these products in freshwater too. All metal on this unit right here is stainless steel. It's got a sacrificial zinc anode. About the only things that we would recommend if you do have this installed in saltwater, please be mindful of that zinc anode quite a bit more frequently than if it's in freshwater. We would say at least once a month, monitor the size of the anode and replace as needed. Guy F. writes, is there a way to automate the de-icer? Great question. Casco's got two options. We've got two different control boxes. We've got the C20 and the C10. A lot of times the C10 is a good option for more mild winter areas and locations. The C10 is you set it at a temperature that you want it to go on at, and any temperature at that point or below, your de-icer runs until the ambient air temperature rises above that set temp. In the northern parts, that might not work out real well because that might run 8 weeks straight in some of the really cold areas. So that's where the C20 comes into play. It's a time and temperature combo. Both conditions have to be met. So the time that you have it set to go on and the temperature you have it set to actually activate have to both be met before your de-icer works. It just eliminates unnecessary runtime. The other option, if you're technologically advanced, you can always look for an outdoor rated smart plug. I don't have any of those, but I know people that do have them and they like them. Outdoor rated smart plug, download the app, and then you can physically turn on and off the de-icer when you see fit. Christopher W. writes, how expensive are these to run? A good question that's tough to answer. If you run this 24 hours a day for the 3 or 4 months straight where you have ice possibly forming, you're going to notice that in your electrical bill. Fortunately, Casco has a really neat feature on the website. It's our electrical cost calculator. As long as you know your kilowatt hour cost and then what motor that you actually have along with what voltage, it will give you down to the exact cent what you would expect to pay with various run times. So you could say, I want to know what this costs to run 24 hours a day. It'll give you a daily and a monthly cost. You might say, I want to run this 8 hours a day, what your daily and monthly cost would be. It's a cool feature. We use it a lot internally and you should check it out. Eric W. writes, how do I attach one of these units to my dock? Eric, good question. We've got a few different mounting options. Standard with a de-icer purchase are going to be these 20-foot de-icer ropes. As long as they're 8 to 10 feet apart, you sling it under a boat cleat or attach it somewhere else to the dock, and your de-icer can perform flawlessly that way. A lot of people don't realize that if you want to angle this to address maybe a longer dock and not maybe a wider dock, you can actually angle these de-icers by taking the rope opposite of where the cord connects and weaving it in and out of the metal tines on the cage right here. And that tilts the de-icer from start, and then at startup it actually kicks back a little bit to give you more of an oval open area instead of a circular open area. If you want something that's a little more robust, we do have our universal and industrial dock mounts. A lot of times with the de-icers, you just need the universal dock mount, and that is, stainless steel parts, a pipe of whatever length you would need. That would be what you need to supply on your own, but get a stainless steel or a galvanized pipe, and then all of the dock mount parts would affix this unit underneath the water at whatever angle that you set it at. Kelly K. writes, did this de-icers save some whales? Kelly, as a matter of fact, yes, they did. A couple of the owners of the company in the 80s went over to Alaska. From my understanding, it was unprovoked. They did it on their own accord. There were some whales trapped in some ice, and the Casco de-icers, along with some generators, helped keep an area open enough so the whales could breathe and then find their way out to the main ocean when the conditions were appropriate. There may have been a movie made about that whole ordeal as well. This is Jason Brzali, Casco's resident educator, and thank you for watching this episode of Ponder This.